Hello and welcome back. I'm Tim Willoughby here with Ian Duke, ready for round 5 here at Pro Tour at the Gatewatch. Last round we were talking about how the Eldrazi were kind of lurking in the background, hadn't quite made it onto our camera. This round they've well and truly invaded the feature match area. Let's head down and find out how. Hello and welcome to round 5 here of Pro Tour Oath of the Gatewatch. Tim Willoughby here with Ian Duke, and we have a feature match area packed with talent and packed with the Eldrazi. We're going down to our first match here between two Japanese Hall of Famers. There we see Shuhei Nakamura. He's playing with Team Channel Fireball, and he actually was potentially looking at skipping this Pro Tour. One of the first Pro Tours he hadn't made it to in a long time until he made top 8 of a recent GP, and now very much back in the seat of things. 3-0'd his draft, and he is here with an Eldrazi deck in, Duke.
Yeah, this Channel Fireball Eldrazi deck is super cool. Of course, it's got the classic Eldrazi mana base of Eye of Ugin and Eldrazi Temple. But the real innovation that Channel Fireball has brought here is the addition of Simian Spirit Guides and Chalice the Void.
Well, he's up against Makihito Mihara in what is going to be a matchup that's pretty important for this Pro Tour. Mihara on Burn, looking to be very aggressive. Let's see how this matchup is going to play out. Well, a turn 1 Simian Spirit Guide allows for Chalice the Void on 1, and one has to think that that is absolutely brutal against a Burn deck.
Yeah, it definitely is, Tim. This is the real innovation of the deck. I mean, Chalice the Void, in a format as fast as Modern, shutting down your opponent's 1-drops can shut down as much as 30%, maybe even 50% of their deck.
Yeah, I'm looking through Mihara's list here, and suddenly Goblin Guide, Grim Lavamancer, Wild Nacatl, Monastery Swiftspear, Lava Spike, Lightning Bolt, all countered upon being cast here. Riftbolt being suspended by there by Mihara, but we can see that he's already got 2 cards stranded in his hand thanks to that Chalice of the Void. And Ghost Quarter coming down for Shuhei Nakamura here.
Yeah, luckily for Mihara, no powerful second turn play for Shuhei Nakamura, just an attack with Blinkmoth Nexus.
Blinkmoth Nexus, not just a man land, it is one that produces colorless mana, and colorless mana very relevant to Eldrazi. Some of the Eldrazi lists are more like mono-black lists that happen to have Eldrazi on top. This list is actually much more straightforwardly a colorless deck.
Yeah, this is nearly mono-colorless, actually.
So an endless one there coming down as a 4/4. No attack from the creature land this turn. And Makihito Mihara drawing kind of thin here. As a 4/4, it's just big enough that one burn spell not going to be enough to deal with it. Mihara fighting the brave fight by pointing at Tarka's command at Nakamura.
Yeah, this is a rough spot for Mihara. Not only are all his 1-drops turned off, that includes most of his creatures, and even if he could resolve a creature, a 4/4 endless one is larger than pretty much all the creatures in the Burn deck.
And there's Matsuri Shaper, just making sure that even if Mihara does get draw steps, he doesn't get too many. Step 1, turn off a lot of your spells. Step 2, kill you real quick. Even if that Matsuri Shaper dies, a good chance that it's going to get something nice for Shuhei Nakamura here as a replacement.
Thought-Knot Seer goes to the hand for Shuhei Nakamura. No 4th land yet, but of course he can cast that Thought-Knot Seer off of Eldrazi Temple next turn.
And Mihara is casting a surprising amount of spells considering what we know about the makeup of his deck and how it faces off against Chalice of the Void. But Matsuri Shaper there revealing that there's not too much going on in Mihara's hand, and more big swings from Nakamura looking to close out this first game fairly decisively.
This has been an impressive showing from the Eldrazi deck. I think the main deck Chalice the Voids are really, really well positioned for this tournament here, Tim.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big talks before this tournament was about how very, very aggressive decks would be well positioned in the field. And we don't know whether or not Shuhei Nakamura knew anything about what Mihara was going to be playing this tournament. He was quite happy to fire off a Chalice for one, just because he knows how good it is in the modern format in total. We'll be able to show you some more Magic very shortly, but first, these messages.
Play in Pro Tour Gauntlet events starting Wednesday on Magic Online and test drive one of the top decks from this Pro Tour. For more information, go to mtgo.com. In the art of Magic the Gathering Zendikar, you can experience the danger and beauty of Zendikar like never before. This lavishly illustrated hardcover book features the award-winning art of Magic the Gathering and gives you an insider's look at the secrets of Zendikar, its peoples, continents, and creatures. On sale now.
Hello and welcome back to round 5 of Pro Tour Oath of the Gatewatch. We've just seen the Eldrazi deck in the hands of Shuhei Nakamura take down game 1 against his opponent Makihito Mihara. We're going to get a chance to see some more of that deck, but in a different set of hands. This Luis Scott Vargas, he's picked up 1 loss so far, but still very much in the fight against his friend Eric Froelich. And again, we see a Chalice of the Void on 1 in play. This time, though, there's Reality Smasher smashing right in and giving Eric Froelich, who's managed to get Scott Vargas down to 12, pause for thought. Looks like he's both taken that hit and fetched with his fetch land. So these life totals going down pretty swiftly here. Predictions of a control-heavy metagame have thus far not seemed accurate. This is very much an aggressive format now that Splinter Twins removal and the addition of Oath of the Gatewatch has shaken things up a bit. Though I suppose that Luis Scott Vargas does have a permanent in play that counters spells. So Restoration Angel from Eric Froelich at end of turn means that he's going to be able to attack Scott Vargas here down to just single-digit life total. Luis, normally a very quick player, pausing for thought here, but equally Eric Froelich, exactly the sort of man who's able to read that sort of play like a book. So attacks here from Blinkmoth Nexus and the Reality Smasher. And a big Court of Calling. Eric Froelich's deck is one that's able to do some fairly nifty things when it comes to Court of Calling. It's not simply playing it for value. There is a big combo in there.
Yeah, this looks like Court of Calling for Eternal Witness here.
Yeah, Kiki Jiki already in the graveyard. Not quite sure how many copies of it are in Eric Froelich's deck, but with Kiki Jiki you can do some very, very naughty things in this deck.
Yeah, and sure enough, Kiki Jiki coming back off the Eternal Witness, that is going to threaten lethal attack this turn. And Ephro going for it.
Yeah, a Dismember, basically the only thing that might save Scott Vargas there. Turns out he does not have it. Eric Froelich picking up the first game there. We can see that Nakamura and Mihara still shuffling up after they've sideboarded. So we're going to get a chance to see a little bit more Eldrazi action. This time, though, a rather different Eldrazi list. This our King of the Hill table, and we have Ryoichi Tamada. He is playing black Eldrazi. Now, talk us through the big highlights of this list, at least in terms of game 1.
Yeah, so one of the major draws to playing black in your Eldrazi deck is it lets you combine Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth with your special Eldrazi lands like Eye of Ugin. And off of that black mana, we see Ryoichi Tamada is splashing 3 copies of Packrat, actually.
Yeah, also a very disruptive discard package, but right here it's Dismembers the black spell being cast and not too much pain being taken to do so, clearing the way for a couple of Thought-Knot Seers to get stuck in. They're not just discard spells, they are also really pretty effective attackers. And Alex Bianchi, he's playing one of the sort of developments, I guess, following on from the lack of Splinter Twin. This a Jeskai control deck, more akin to what was being played by Sean McLaren at the Pro Tour, where he wasn't actually needing all of the Splinter Twin side of things, simply able to play control. In this case, though, falling to the Eldrazi. The Eldrazi doing great work in this feature match area.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been very impressive so far.
In fact, the only feature match not featuring any Eldrazi in this feature match area, the one we've not had a chance to see yet, Darwin Castle on Affinity is playing against John Finkel with Infect, but we're going to get a chance to go back to our main match here. On the left of our screen, that's Shuhei Nakamura. On the right, we have Makihito Mihara, just played a Grim Lavamancer there. Eldrazi Mimic on turn 1 from Shuhei Nakamura. In principle, there is a very exciting start for some of the decks involving Eldrazi Mimic, where you just simply play an Eye of Ugin and then cast, 4 of them on the first turn. Kind of Magical Christmas Land, but every now and again, somewhere in this room, there's the potential it may happen.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. Eldrazi Mimic, one of the cards that leads to the explosive Eldrazi draws, although notably not all the Eldrazi decks. In fact, I think most aren't playing Eldrazi Mimic at the tournament here today. So just showcasing a couple different directions you can take the Eldrazi deck.
As it is, though, Mihara off to a better start here, notably not being hampered by a Chalice of the Void here, able to deploy a whole bunch of 1-drops. Grim Lavamancer in play, along with Monastery Swiftspear, clearing a path, killing the first Eldrazi Mimic. But there's Spellskite, which will represent a fairly major speed bump for Makihito Mihara here, unless he can find an appropriate answer pretty quickly. Not just a 0-4 blocker, also able to change targets onto Spellskite, and with 4 toughness, most individual burn spells not quite enough to kill it. You can see a Molten Rain in hand for Makihito Mihara here, and being on the play, that's going to be a nice one, able to take down some of the powerful lands that Shuhei Nakamura is using alongside his Eldrazi, send him right back to the Stone Age and deal some points of damage on top. And there we see it, Eldrazi Temple going away. 2 points of damage on top there from the Molten Rain. 3 mana land destruction, not necessarily something that R&D pushes through too much these days.
Yeah, much less 3 mana double land destruction against the Eldrazi deck. Killing 1 land is like killing 2.
Looks like Nakamura, though, able to bounce back. He's got that Blinkmoth Nexus there to cast an Eldrazi Mimic. Destructive Revelry there, taking down Spellskite. When every one of your removal spells also deals damage to your opponent's face, you're in a pretty good spot. There's Eldrazi Mimic, got the sort of Kozilek-style face there, and potentially with a big creature here. So this, a 3/3 Endless One, means that that Mimic able to attack for a little bit more.
So Grim Lavamancer declining to kill the Eldrazi Mimic in response to its stat copying trigger, instead dealing 2 damage to Shuhei Nakamura himself. Likely means there's a flurry of burn about to be followed up with here from Makihito Mihara.
Well, Path to Exile successfully getting rid of the 1 remaining blocker for Shuhei Nakamura, clearing a path for a couple of hasty attacks, and this time we see Grim Lavamancer quite happy to sit back and get activated to deal more burn. Previously, it was getting attacks on.
Yeah, that will drop Shuhei down to just 4 points of life with an, believe an active Grim Lavamancer. It's hard to get a look at the graveyard here at this angle, but
it's kind of cool that the only basic lands in Shuhei Nakamura's deck are 2 copies of Wastes. So when someone casts a Path to Exile on him, he is able to fetch a basic land. And that enough to push things to a game 3. Makihito Mihara on the play there, able to exploit that to the maximum. We're going to get a chance to jump across to one of our other matches, though. The 4th match that we've not had a chance to see from yet on the left of our screen. Hall of Famer Darwin Castle against, on the right, Hall of Famer John Finkel. Now, both of these players, about 20 years ago, were at the very first Pro Tour. Darwin Castle in the seniors event. He was actually congratulating John Finkel earlier on being young enough that he was playing in the juniors event.
Yep. Yeah, this is a feature match that could have been straight out of 1999 or what have you. So it's really cool to see these Hall of Famers still going at it, still being successful.
And a bit of a poison mirror there. loads of Inkmoth Nexus poison coming from Darwin Castle, outracing the poison coming from John Finkel's poison. So that one moving to sideboarding. We have got some more matches to show you, though. We're going to jump back and see a little bit more of Luis Scott Vargas up against Eric Froelich. Remember that on the left of our screen, Vargas is playing with the same sort of Eldrazi deck as Shuhei Nakamura. On the right-hand side, that being Eric Froelich. And this time round, Scott Vargas's draw, plenty of creatures in play. Will there be a combo from Froelich, though, to dismantle this? It looks like that might be Kiki Jiki already exiled thanks to one of 2 Thought-Knot Seers, and that could be a big deal in terms of Eric Froelich's combo potential here.
Wow, super aggressive draw from Luis here. Eldrazi Mimic copying Reality Smasher, just crashing in for a ton of damage here.
Yeah, does not copy the Trample, but it's still a 5/5 body, which is substantially larger than the standard 2/1. Eye of Ugin doing some great work here. This is not necessarily a deck that can search out a big finish with its Eye of Ugin. It's not necessarily going to find you a Kozilek or anything similar, Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger perhaps. But in the meantime, it does make basically all of your spells cost 2 less. All of your creatures cost 2 less. Apart from, I suppose, that Simian Spirit Guide lurking away somewhere in the list. So Eric down to just 5 life off that attack and needing something pretty big off the top of his deck here. I got a chance to speak to Shuhei Nakamura about this deck between rounds earlier on. And he's not necessarily one to blow his own trumpet about decks or sort of act super confident, but he was like, I think I like my deck. I think my deck's quite good. And seeing it in action, I kind of have to agree.
Yeah, it's been looking quite good so far this round.
We'll just take an extra turn or so here. It looks like things kicking off for Nakamura and Mihara on the front table, but thus far no permanents in play. We'll see whether or not Luis can put this one away for us in the next turn or so before we jump back. Dismember on one of the blockers that Eric Froelich has going on here. Killing off Scavenging Ooze, potentially decisive here. There may not be time for that Gavany Township to prove relevant. All that Eric could do there was eat some creatures in the graveyard with the Scavenging Ooze before it got killed off by Dismember. Not because he wanted to make his creature bigger, but simply because he wanted to gain a couple of points of life, because this is a big set of swings coming in here. But it looks like Luis has got it anyway, and we'll get a chance to jump right back to our Table A match. Shuhei Nakamura against Makihito Mihara. More Eldrazi, more of the time. I'm perfectly fine with this. A fitting start to Oath of the Gatewatch being in constructed. And here's another Molten Rain on Eldrazi Temple. Just such a powerful play. But this time there is a Reality Smasher already around, and that kind of putting the brakes on for Mihara when it comes to attacking. Kind of not a great sign for Mihara when he sees the 5/5 coming in. And we get a chance to see the interaction between Urborg and Eye of Ugin here.
Oh, wow. Double Simian Spirit Guides. That's a 7/7 endless one.
Yeah, the first time that I encountered Eye of Ugin letting you cast Endless One in a huge way was definitely not a happy time for me, because sadly it was not me being clever doing deck building. It was someone else being clever doing one of my matches on Magic Online. And the interaction between Urborg and Eye of Ugin, just something that has made many of these Eldrazi decks that much more powerful. When your land makes your Eldrazi cost less and taps for mana, it's just great. There we see the Expedition version. Originally printed in Worldwake, that version, though, straight out of Oath of the Gatewatch. Nakamura there, fetching a waste off the path to exile. And on just 2 life here. I mean, the perfect thing to do here would simply be to cast a Reality Smasher and smash. The fact that it's not already happened suggests to me that there's going to have to be something cleverer here from Shuhei Nakamura. Because he knows that if he untaps, there's a very, very good chance that this burn deck will be able to find a way of dealing those last 2 points. Shuhei Nakamura, one of the most experienced players at this Pro Tour, or indeed any Pro Tour. He has more Planeswalker points than just about anybody on the planet, and indeed more than quite a lot of people on the planet put together. He has been playing a crazy amount of matches of Magic for a very, very long time indeed. But in a rough spot here against Makihito Mihara's burn deck. Little smile on Mihara's face there. I think that he knows as well as anyone that the longer that Shuhei Nakamura thinks here, the better it is for him in some respects, because it means that there's not an easy answer. Is there a burn spell here from Mihara? Well, there's a lightning bolt. That enough for Shuhei Nakamura to scoop them up. Makihito Mihara wins 2 games to 1. We're going to get a chance to see whether or not in our other decider match on the back table we get to see if the Eldrazi can do a little better. Luis Scott Vargas, he's picked up 1 loss so far this tournament, and he's up against his friend Eric Froelich. The game just started. And Eldrazi mimic the first play from Luis Scott Vargas. And there's Birds of Paradise, original beta Birds of Paradise from Eric Froelich. And Thought Not Seer getting to take the best card right out of Eric Froelich's hand. And it takes it for good because this is an exile ability. Kind of an embarrassment of riches there. 2 copies of Path to Exile, a Courser of Krufix, Court of Calling, and Restoration Angel. Taking the first removal spell. Just great stats there we see on the side of the screen for Luis Scott Vargas. A member of the Hall of Fame and playing a huge amount of Pro Tours, top 8ing 5 of them. He's won 1 of them, and soon to be a father. Gut shot to deal with Birds of Paradise. That kind of an interesting addition. 3 of them in the sideboard for this Eldrazi deck that's come out of the original Channel Fireball team.
So the player's shortcutting a little bit here, end of the turn. This looks like Ifro fetching for Sacred Foundry untapped into Path to Exile on the Thought Not Seer, and Luis responds with Gut Shot on Ifro's Birds of Paradise.
The problem being faced by Eric Froelich here, he did not play a land that turn. The best that he could do is a relatively unscary copy of Voice of Resurgence, as compared to a very scary indeed Endless One that has pumped an Eldrazi Mimic up to 7/7. And now just a 1/1 elemental token to go alongside the lands for Eric Froelich. He finds an Overgrown Tomb, happily pays the 2 life, and casts Course of Krufix. Is there another land on top? Yes, there is.
Yeah, this is a tricky spot for Ifro. That Gut Shot was really important because Ifro does have Restoration Angel and Court of Calling. If he had time and mana to assemble those things, he'd be able to get the Kiki Jiki combo going, but no, does not have enough time in the face of that Gut Shot and Dismember Disruption.
Well, we've got another result for you. Ryoshi Tamada remains King of the Hill. He defeats Alex Bianchi's Jeskai control deck. We will see more of him in the feature match area. Just the 2 matches, or just the 1 match left here, in fact, because it looks like Luis Scott Vargas able to put things away. Now we just have Darwin Castle with his Affinity deck up against John Finkel on Infect. So Finkel has 1 piece of the puzzle. He's got Infect creatures in play. Glistener Elf, the more straightforward 1/1 for 1 with Infect. Then Inkmoth Nexus also. Does he have the pump spells? We'll find out soon enough. For Darwin Castle, it's more sort of out there on the board. He's got his collection of artifacts, and with 2 copies of Signal Pest, he's able to attack in and be very difficult to block here.
I'll attack this to the Ravager. Yeah. Pass.
Darwin on 24 life, but life not the important bit against an Infect deck. He's already taken 3 points of poison.
I guess I don't care about 4 life, so I will make my Ravager bigger.
Gradually, Arcbound Ravager growing there. Protection from artifacts thanks to an Apostle's Blessing means that there's going to be no blocking for Darwin Castle here. The big question is, how much pump does Jon Finkel have? He's on 9 life. He can't afford to take too much damage here, but potentially, well, there's +4/+4 from a Might of Old Crowser.
So that'll... Okay. So you have no block? I'm just confirming. I have no cards in hand, so as far as I know, there's no way I can possibly block.
I just want to confirm the
so not blocking. So...
Yep, that's +6/+6, Darwin. I'm afraid to say that even if you hadn't taken poison earlier on in the game, that a colossal swing there from Jon Finkel that forces a game 3 here. This our last match in the feature match area.
Yeah, sort of like
Let's talk a little bit about this matchup, because it's one that we're likely to see a fair amount this weekend. Both of these decks, some of the more popular ones. In principle, there can be Infect coming from both sides. Both these games we've seen thus far can come down to poison. The difference being that the Affinity deck can just simply have an explosive draw and beat down more traditionally. But some of the powerful cards in Affinity, the likes of Vault Scourge to gain life, not quite so relevant here.
Yeah, absolutely.
As the players are just shuffling up here and doing their sideboarding, we are going to get a chance to see exactly what's going down on the floor here. We've got our camera roving in the sky, showing you exactly what's going on, and we'll get a chance to see quite how many matches still out there. This a kind of quick format, but that doesn't mean to say that you can't get deadlock. We can see quite a few players still doing the do here in round 5. This is the first round where you can actually really be out of the Pro Tour. A 4-4 record will get you into day 2. So in some respects, some of these players will be playing for their tournament life. It looks like we've got a number of top players. It looks like I can see we have Tomohara Saito. He's still playing his match there. Unsurprised to see Frank Carsten still playing. A little bit of a methodical player, but does love his Affinity. And this is a tournament where Affinity, very, very powerful. And somewhere back behind all of that is our little Whisper Cube, where myself, Tim Willoughby, and Ian Duke are doing a thing. We are waving, honest we are. You can't see us. In fact, all you can see is this is Pro Tour Oath of the Gatewatch, and we're heading back to very shortly be able to see that man, Jon Finkel, Hall of Famer, against that man, Darwin Castle, Hall of Famer, playing a little bit more Magic. Darwin Castle's a player that actually I would potentially have thought might have brought something really unusual. I would say that he has one of the biggest ranges of decks that he might play in a tournament of almost anyone in the room. Jon Finkel, he's kind of portrayed himself thus far in modern Pro Tours to be very keen on something very aggressive and ideally non-interactive almost. We've seen him play Infect a couple of times. We've seen him play Storm a couple of times.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I think Jon does tend to favor those decks. That said, you know, he is a part of Team Pantheon. They do a lot of testing together. And actually, Jon made a comment last night at dinner that really resonated with me. He said, you know, I'm here with a lot of smart people, and chances are that a lot of smart people thinking together are going to come up with a smarter idea than I can alone. So he tends to go with what the team comes up with, and I think that's a really wise choice in this case.
So we get a chance to see the opening hand here from Castle. There's not any lands in there, but actually that not automatically a massive problem for him, because with the likes of Mox Opal, maybe an Ornithopter going on, he may have some mana there, but definitely a tough decision for Castle, as Finkel looks at a hand that's a little bit more straightforwardly lands and spells. Memnite, Mox Opal. Who needs lands? He has Metalcraft. He's able to tap for mana. He can even Galvanic Blast on the first turn if he wanted, but Signal Pest seems like a safer choice. No land, no problem. Yours. Jon Finkel will struggle to have a start quite as explosive as that, but he doesn't need nearly as many permanents in order to get his game going here. Windswept Heath finding a green source. I would guess most likely a breeding pool here. No, just a straightforward forest and casting a Glistener Elf. I think I did glimpse Rancor in John Finkel's hand, which will be able to force through damage, even in spite of some potential blockers on Darwin Castle's side of the table.
Yeah, the real question this game is going to be, how does Darwin use his Galvanic Blast? Is he going to hold it up, indefinitely throughout the game and just try to get in for 4 damage at a time? Is he going to try to get a couple more threats on the table first? And in turn, how is John going to move in on this Glistener Elf? Is he just going to very quickly try to go for a quick kill, or is he going to play it a little bit more slowly and try to, keep up tricks to defend the Glistener Elf?
You don't normally see that many pump spells in constructed Magic. This certainly one of the few decks that runs a whole host of them. And that really changes the timing on when you might use a removal spell, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the tricky things with this Infect deck is it needs just sort of the perfect mix of creatures and pump spells in order to assemble a combo kill. Sometimes the Infect deck only draws 1 creature, and if you just kill it right away when the shields are down and they can't play a pump spell, you can get away with a free win. But, of course, that's always a gamble. If the Infect deck is able to follow up with another creature and they haven't expended any pump spells in the first one, then you run the risk of wasting your removal spell, not getting the maximum efficiency out of it.
So we saw there a Springleaf Drum followed up by Vault Scourge from Darwin Castle. The 1/1 flying lifelink. The lifelink not so relevant as the flying potentially here, able to block even an Inkmoth Nexus. I could spy Become Immense in John Finkel's hand, so he'll be looking to get cards in the graveyard, and one great way of doing that is, of course, these fetch lands.
Yep.
Rancor giving trample to his 1/1 Glistener Elf, along with +2 power. The fact that John Finkel is attacking in here in spite of the Vault Scourge suggests to me that he likely either has a pump spell, he often will have a pump spell in this deck, or that he has another creature that he's going to be able to play. The Rancor comes back even if that creature dies, so it's not going to hurt. And we actually see that he has both of those options. Nice to have options. Gets in his first points of poison on Darwin Castle here.
Yeah, not a huge amount of value in blocking there, since the Rancor does grant trample, and as you said, Tim, it's almost for certain that John has either a pump spell or a follow-up creature.
I mean, essentially, pump spells and creatures is his deck, aside from the lands that he needs to get everything going. But with a Spellskite and a Galvanic Blast, there is a fair amount of disruption potentially here from Darwin Castle. Spellskite, very good against the poison decks.
Yeah, absolutely. Spellskite is going to be huge. I imagine we'll see that this turn from Darwin.
Darwin, who it should be noted, has not yet drawn a land in this game. Yeah, the fact that the Phyrexian mana cost to redirect things on Spellskite is simply damaging life rather than him dealing with any infect means that Darwin Castle can afford to redirect an awful lot of things with it if he so chooses. As it is, though, it looks like Darwin might just be happy to flood the board a bit. He starts off with a Springleaf Drum. If he draws the likes of a Master of Ethereum or similar, it will have a big impact on this board.
Sorry.
I'd really like to see Darwin get that Spellskite onto the battlefield this turn.
All right.
I think he's considering maybe just leaving up the Galvanic Blast, but that is potentially pretty dangerous. Could be a combination of pump spells or, some kind of blue disruption like a Spell Pierce or something like that. Means that Galvanic Blast would not be a totally safe bet just by itself. And yeah, it does look like Darwin takes the slightly more conservative route and gets the Spellskite in play, which I definitely agree with.
Finkel happy to take a point to fetch a land, get a card in the graveyard, which might make Become Immense better. And no pain from that breeding pool, as he's just going to put it into play tapped at the end of turn. Finkel comes a rumbling. Now, I guess the good thing about Infect on top of everything else. Under normal circumstances, you attack your 3-1 into your opponent's 0-4 and they just bounce. Because of Infect, though, you are going to get to put a whole bunch of counters on there. So we see 3 -1/-1 counters on Spellskite. It now a -3/1 creature. Now the -3 functionally the same as 0, but the ability is still very relevant. And 2 cards drawn here of Thought Size for Darwin Castle.
Thought Cast, rather.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, this is a really tough spot for John here. That Spellskite came down at just the right time. It looks like John's got access to some pump spells in his hand, but he can't really take any action there until the Spellskite is off the table. And that's going to be, it's looking like a minimum of 2 more turns for John before he can really deploy the pump spells in his hand. And of course we know Darwin also sitting on a Galvanic Blast. So this is going to be a really tough maze of answers for John to navigate through. That said, I mean, Darwin has a good amount of pressure, but it's not like super life-threatening here. So, you know, John probably has about 2 turns to piece something together, ideally.
So an attack for 4 here on the face of things from Castle. Inkmoth Nexus steps up. The creature land looking to block completely safely on Signal Pest. And then a spare Glistener Elf effectively jumping in the way of a Mem Knight.
Yeah, great blocks here by John. I mean, this takes away a lot of Darwin's pressure. And we see Darwin fiddling with the Glimmer Void. I wonder if he's considering using a Galvanic Blast. And he does.
Yeah, keeping around Signal Pest represents potentially quite a bit of damage. There are more creatures set on the battlefield there. One of the Mem Knights did not come in, instead choosing to sit on its drum. Now that a great draw for John Finkel in the face of a Spellskite. It looked like he's going to be able to do something pretty nifty here in terms of switching power and toughness.
Are you at 11 now?
There's exactly 1 copy of Twisted Image in John Finkel's sideboard. Clearly coming in this matchup where Spellskite a problem, and switching the power and toughness of a creature with 0, or in this case less power, and drawing a card, absolutely fantastic use of mana. So before anything else, John Finkel looking to get rid of that Spellskite because it will open the door to a big become immense here. And the response, a Galvanic Blast. I like this timing a lot for Darwin Castle here.
Yeah, so this is in the middle of combat. The Rankered Glistener Elf is blocked by Mem Knight. John Finkel Twisted Images the Spellskite, but in response, Darwin Castle is using Galvanic Blast. And what this does is, if John was planning to respond to Galvanic Blast with some pump spells, the Spellskite is still on the battlefield at this time. So Darwin Castle could redirect him to the Spellskite, which would not only soak them up, but also potentially keep it alive through the Twisted Image. So really, really nice sequence there by Castle.
As it is, a Noble Hierarch at the follow-up. That Rancor going back to John Finkel's hand when the Glistener Elf died, so we see it come right back down again.
Yeah, unfortunately on a Noble Hierarch this time, so a lot less threatening since it's not dealing infect damage.
Yeah, an awful lot of work to do if John Finkel planning on winning this game with more traditional sources of damage, because Darwin Castle's still on 22 life. And more big attacks here coming from Darwin Castle. We see that now he's not really too worried about holding back with his creatures. When the only one is threatening regular damage, it's not nearly as scary, even with the a handful of pump spells potentially from Finkel.
All right, so you're taking a total of 2, and I'm gaining 2. 24.
Single-digit life total now for Finkel. Be a little concerned, and another Vault Scourge, meaning that Darwin Castle's life total likely to be going up rather than down. The Infect plan, it was always plan A, but plan B looking pretty terrible now for John Finkel. John Finkel and Darwin Castell. They were classmates in the very first Hall of Fame. Finkel been a little bit more active in the last few years, though.
But John's not out of this game yet. I mean, Darwin has 4 points of damage a turn so far. John's at 9. So if he does top deck Infect Creature next turn, with the combination of pump spells in his hand, he could actually be in great shape here.
The Dismember sat in Finkel's hand. Necessarily something he's going to be able to cast because his life total in a pretty precarious state here. On 5. Apostle's Blessing likely to be more important if he wants to sneak through damage.
Yeah, looks like John did not hit a creature that turn, instead just picking up another support spell in the form of Apostle's Blessing. So I believe it's going to be too late for him at this point with Steel Overseer coming down.
And there's another Dismember drawn, and that the handshake from John Finkel. Darwin Castle wins 2 games to 1. That meaning that Finkel now on 3-2. Darwin Castle, though, 4-1, a nice spot to be in at this stage in the tournament. And that the end of our match in the feature match area. Lots of action from various different Eldrazi lists. Either of them your particular favorite at this point?
I like the Channel Fireball list a lot. I think the inclusion of main deck Chalice the Void is just really, really well positioned for the tournament. Awesome inclusion there.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly saw just in the very first game of our feature match area this round, when you cast a turn 1 Chalice of the Void, yeah. I mean, at that point we don't know Shuhei Nakamura realized that Burn was the thing that he was playing against, but stopping 1-drops always a powerful
almost
thing
against
to do.
Any deck on the play. It's just a great spot to be in.
But that's the end of our round from the feature match area. I'm going to be heading back down to the feature match area to see things live from the next few rounds. But stay tuned, because from the news desk, we've got all the action for here from round 5, and obviously plenty more action for future rounds here at Pro Tour at the Gatewatch.
Thanks very much to Tim and Ian. Now, the way that Swiss pairings work, where you always play against someone on the same record as yourself, more or less, just apart from the odd buys or draws or whatever it turns out to be, but mostly everyone's on the same record. You start with 400 players, you get 200 players at 1-0, 100 at 2-0, 50, 24, 25. A dozen or so players get to 5-0. Some of the players who have made it to that perfect start, 5-0, include Suripong Popitagul of Thailand. He defeated Fabrizio Anteri. Almost no one's been able to do that recently. Anteri falls to 4-1. Martin Muller of Denmark 5-0. So is the Brazilian Thiago Saporito. The Platinum Pro Matt Nass fell to him in this round 5. Ryuichi Tamada on track for another Pro Tour top 8 early. Still a long way to go, of course. 11 rounds still to come. Matej Zatlkai, he got to 5-0 at the expense of the Player of the Year Mike Sigrist. Sigrist has his first defeat 4-1. Zatlkai 5-0. In the Japan battle, we saw Makihito Mihara, the 2006 world champion, take out the 2008 Player of the Year Shuhei Nakamura, both in the Hall of Fame, of course, and someone else in the Hall of Fame is Frank Karsten. He'll be along in just a few minutes to talk to us about his, yes, that's right, it's a shock, I know, affinity deck. Meanwhile, Paul Cheon and Louis Scott Vargas are on collision course, possibly for a round 6 clash. They're both 4-1, and just hearing that Jason Chung, the New Zealand Platinum Pro, has advanced to 5-0 over Carl Bogomez, who was the finalist behind Simon Gertzen in 2010. All right, so that's what's going on here, but with around about a minute left in the round, BDM is out on the floor, and I imagine there are still a fair few matches going. So, Brian David Marshall, what's happening out on the floor?
All right, Brian David Marshall here with reigning world champion Seth Manfield. Seth, how's your tournament going?
Pretty good. I'm 3-2 right now. I've got 1 loss in each constructed and modern, but I feel pretty good. I feel like I was a little unlucky to lose the rounds I lost. Drafted pretty well, and I like my deck moving forward in modern.
So modern, that's where your first Pro Tour top 8 came, right?
Yeah, I've traditionally done well in modern events, and I feel like I know the format well, and the deck I'm playing has some new twist to it, but I'm still playing aggressive creatures and burn and just trying to, get 20 damage in as soon turn 3, turn 4. That's kind of what I'm known for almost, and our team name is Team Blitz, so that's basically my style. So
tell me a little bit about Team Blitz. How was it preparing with a somewhat new team for you for this Pro Tour?
Yeah, I mean, the team's kind of evolved a little bit. It's been nice. There's a large contingent of the team lives in Roanoke near Star City, and then you've got me, and you've got the Outliers. You got my friend Chris Fennell, who's currently got 1 loss in the tournament, and it was good. We all sort of gel together. We've got our limited guys, we've got our constructed guys, we've got our niche archetype guys, and we've got other players we can draw on. We've got like Tom Ross, who lives in Roanoke. We can say, hey, we want the best infect list, and some of us have taken that advice to heart. So.
All right, awesome. You got a little bit of work to do, but you're in okay shape heading into the last rounds here at Pro Tour Oath of the Gatewatch.
So that was Seth Manfield, came in yesterday to talk to us, and now that's the state of play for him. More results coming in. Let's talk about some 4-1s, because, so like I say, only a dozen players or so have that perfect 5-0 record. So amongst the 4-1s, Gabriel Fair is doing very nicely, a former Brazilian team member. He was part of the Nice World Magic Cup squad. He's 4-1. That means Robin Dola of Slovenia is at 3-2. More results coming in here for you. Bartlomiej Lewandowski of Poland, he's 5-0. He's defeated Nathan Holiday. You remember Lewandowski was in feature match action last round against Alexandra Cesar from Argentina. 12 matches left by our reckoning. One of those has a Brian David Marshall standing by them. BDM, what you got for us?
Hey, Rich, I'm watching a match. You can see a big crowd gathered here along the rail watching Hall of Famer Ben Stark as he plays against Rodrigo Conclaves dos Santos, who I believe is coming off a pretty good weekend in Grand Prix Mexico City. And the two players, Ben Stark seems to be playing a 4-color aggro deck. Santos is playing a more traditional Naya Burn deck. They're in Game 3. They have a couple of extra minutes with a judge standing by. He's got the 5 extra turns all laid out, ready to go. They're coming up on time. No, it looks like we've got a match win. Hold on. What I say is true. Ben Stark has won the match. So that just happened. Ben Stark won, managed to do it before they ran out of time. That's what's happening here on the floor.
Right, great stuff, BDM. Thanks so much. Great to just get you as close as we can to the action. Skycam hard at work there for you. So a couple of others at 4-1. Josh Utter-Leighton from Team Channel Fireball has only one defeat. He defeated Japan's Takashi Kawaguchi that round. And also Frank Lepore, once a TCG player, he's now at 4-1 over China's Huao Chao Song. So Song at 3-2, Lepore 4-1. That's a tremendous start to his first Pro Tour. Melissa DeTora, his other half, definitely rooting for Frank in this one. I know a lot of you are too. We hear a lot about how popular Frank is around the Magic community. All right, so it's Deck Tech time once again. We thought, who can we possibly find to talk to us about Affinity? Well, it is one of the most popular decks, and a man who we pretty much knew was going to play it. From the Hall of Fame, 5-0, here comes Frank Karsten.